Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have a good friend of mine on the program with me. You say, Brian, every time you bring somebody in there, a good friend of yours, or you have a treat for us, and I do. I'm blessed to have a great network of friends that I can call on to share their stories with you. And today is no different. My guest today is Alex Smith, not the Washington Redskins quarterback. That would be a huge get. And he and I both, we kind of flip out over that one. But Alex Smith is the host of the Stories of Selling Human podcast and is also a sales champion. He's a mentor, a leader, a coach in the sales industry. And Alex has got a lot to contribute and a lot to say. But he's going to say it right here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Alex, how are you today? Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast.
I love it. I love it, Brian. Thank you very much for having me. That was a great introduction.
Well, I try.
Just really happy to be here, man. You bring the energy. I love it. I love it. Well, and I will offer some better insights than maybe you're going to ever find from our good friend Alex Smith, the quarterback, I promise.
Well, if we were looking for insights on surgeries on your lower right leg, then he's our guy. Yeah, he's our guy.
This isn't the surgery podcast.
This isn't the intentional surgery podcast. No, man, I appreciate you coming on this morning because, and again, you talk about the introductions. The conversations, you make the introductions good enough, people will go, well, yeah, that's really good. Let's stay with the rest of the conversation. So let's dive in this morning, Alex. What made you decide? I know the reasons I decided to podcast. I wanted to tell really cool stories of people that I knew and wanted to bring an encouragement piece to anybody in all walks of life. You decided to podcast for a different reason. What was the impetus behind you getting into the podcast game?
Yeah, no, great question. I think, somebody gave me a great piece of advice early on. It's like, would you want a podcast if nobody was ever listening? Would it be fun to you? And why? And I really wrestled with it, and I was like, yeah, it would. And why? And it was months and months ago. It took me a long time to actually launch it, maybe 6 or 7 months ago. But when I was coming up with this idea, it was really just inspired by a great book I read. It was a book called To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink. And it really speaks to what I just believe is so true in sales, is that everyone inside of us, no matter who you are, all human beings, we all want to be heard, we all want to be seen, we all want to be understood. And I was just noticing things throughout my life. I think, you probably, same thing when you're starting your podcast, you're kind of noticing things just in your day-to-day and your experiences, and you go back and you notice things, mm-hmm. and you kind of put a framework around it. And so that's what I was noticing things in my career. That book is all centered around, we all have the traits to be good at what he deemed as moving others.
You mean this book?
I love it. I love it. I love when people show it to me, because some people don't. And when they have that and we connect, we just know we get each other. We don't even have to go too much into detail about it. But for your listeners who haven't read that book, it's a great book. And it's not like most sales books. He's not a trained salesperson. He's an author. He's a keynote speaker, New York Times bestselling author. And it was just, he was realizing in his day-to-day that, man, as an author, I gotta sell my book idea to somebody, to a publisher. I have to, convince my kids to do something every day. I have to convince myself to do things every single day. So isn't that sales? And he wanted to dive into that. And that's what the book is. And so, what really inspired me was the premise of that like, really, can all human, what does it mean to sell? What is that word? It's such a broad term. And what are humans doing on a daily basis, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, to really connect with others and to, sometimes create, with all sales, it's creating change. So how are people creating change in a very human way, using things, just skills that we all have as humans? We were all blessed with 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. We were all blessed with wanting to genuinely, connect with people, really try to, we were blessed with the ability to be kind to others, and that, begets kindness, and just soft skills. When people call it soft skills, I call them human skills. And so we all have these skills, and that's what inspired me. And I called it Stories of Selling Human, is because I wanted just to, like this, I think everyone's unique story helps them we all do it differently, but our unique stories help us when we have to create change, persuade, convince, or influence others. And I just wanted to showcase that and contrast it with professional salespeople.
Well, and people love a good story. Everybody loves a good story. I made a living in sales for years telling my customers stories of other customers walking through the same journeys that they were walking through. If I had a customer that said, "Hey, I'm struggling with this," I would say, "Well, I had a customer that had a similar situation, and here's how we solved the problem." Now, I'm going to let you and I dive into it a little bit more. As you talk about, and the reason I have the book, and I'll share a little bit about how I got the book. I have a good friend of mine that teaches marketing and sales at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina. I've known him for 30 years. And when I would travel that way, he would say, "Hey, come and speak to my class. Come and talk to my class about sales and marketing and things like that." And his class gave me the book one day and signed it when I was there speaking for them. And so to your point of, now every time I see this book, I'll remember the time I went to ECU and spoke to his class about selling. Alex, when you think about your career in selling, what's the best story that you have from your sales career that you can share?
Oh man, I love this question, but it's tough because there's so many good ones. There was one time where I'm going to go with a funny one and then like a heartfelt one. Okay. So the funny one was, I went into, I was running late to a meeting. It was traffic in Philly. I'm going out to meet with this retirement facility for the first time. We were trying to sell them our products with Monster and with digital recruiting products. And this is my first meeting. I'm trying to meet this guy. He was with a competitor, and it was a big opportunity. It could be big. Traffic, I didn't leave enough time. I'm late. I'm running like 15 late minutes. It's one of those emailing, "Hey, I'm sorry," that sort of thing. On top of that, I walk in and I don't even know how to say this, but I walk in and there's some tree like on the way in, and I walk in and not without knowing this, and this hasn't happened to me too many times in my life, but a bird literally I don't know if I can say that on my face without saying it. Okay. Yes. So I have bird poop on my face without knowing it. And I walked into this meeting, okay, and didn't know it. And he's like, I'm late, I'm like frustrated. He's like, "You have something on your," and I like, "What?" I'm like, "You know what? I think, I've done too much here. You probably don't really have any respect for me. You're not gonna buy anything from me. I feel terrible. Don't assume anything. Don't be so quick to assume." And it just kind of stopped. There was a funny story, and they actually bought, and he was a good client for years and years and years. But I thought, just this guy thinks I'm a mess. But that was just kind of a human thing that happened to me.
So here's the thing, man. If he really thought you were a craphead, no pun intended, he wouldn't have bought anything from you,
Yeah. So
sorry. That's great, man. That's great.
I held it back, but okay. So the bird poop story, but the more human story is, the thing I'm most proud of is a couple of years ago, I'm working with a client that was a new client. They had come over from a competitor, large national retailer, one of my, I guess you could say, best brands that I've ever worked with. and national, global. They're a global brand, and we got them to come over from a competitor, and we were together for years. And there was an opportunity. We never met in person. We always dealt over the phone. Everything we did was over the phone. We did business together for a couple of years, and there was an opportunity where we were having a conference in Chicago, and I happened to be in Chicago, and this person, I couldn't travel out to meet her because she was always on the road all the time. We just could never connect. And this perfect opportunity to connect happened. We had a conference, we invited her, she was going to be there. She's from Chicago. She was going to be at this conference. And I was going to be in Chicago, but in the suburbs. And so I wasn't going to be able to make the conference. The only way I could make the conference and see her was if I drove from the suburbs of Chicago in morning rush hour traffic, and I had a meeting in the suburbs, so I could only literally go and see her for 10 or 15 minutes in the middle of the conference, and then I had to jet back. It would have been a 4-hour trip, wake up at 4 or 5, drive, come back by 12. And I told her I was going to do that. She said, "That's crazy. Don't do that. It's if you're from Chicago or know the traffic, it's hell to pay in the morning." But I said, "Look, it's the right thing to do. I just want to meet you. And I want to shake your hand, give you a hug, meet you in person, tell you, just we can just talk. There was no contract to be signed. There was nothing more than just, I thought it felt the right thing to do for me. That's just my approach." And I did that. And, years later, there was some things where she actually almost went to a competitor for a lower amount, and she ended up staying. We did some things for her. And then years later, when I left the company, she even said, "I'll never forget that. I'll never forget you doing that." And she, and I think to this day, she won't, no matter what I do. So, and I wasn't doing it for anything. I wasn't trying to get something from her. I was just being myself and just approaching her in that way. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of that. When people ask me, some people say, "Oh, I closed this sale for $100,000 and I closed this." And yes, I've closed big deals, but it was more that statement from her, that feeling from her, that, man, that gives you that makes you love sales.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is that's why I wrote my first book that's coming out in a couple of months, People Buy From People, is because at the end of the day, and it's amazing to me, Alex, one of the greatest sales quotes that I've ever heard is from a guy that's recognized as a leadership expert, Peter Drucker. He said, "Nothing happens until somebody sells something." But you have to create that relationship, and that's why companies work so hard to create relationships, even virtually, so that they get people it's not natural for us to part with something. Dave Ramsey said one time that when you spend cash on something, there is an emotion that happens to it. You actually feel it when you part with your cash that you've worked hard for something you get in return. And I love what you said there about it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do. When you think about in your career the right things to do, what's the number one credo that you've always used in your career as this is always the right thing to do no matter what? Because I'm reminded of, and I'll let you answer this, but I'm reminded of a movie that I saw one time called Draft Day. It was about the Cleveland Browns. And the general manager writes on a slip of paper 3 or 4 weeks before the draft, he sees this kid named Vontez Mack, this character named Vontez Mack. And he writes on a slip of paper, Vontez Mack, no matter what. What's the one credo that you've lived by in your career, Alex, that you said, I'm going to do this no matter what?
It's a great question, and I don't know if I ever defined it until recently, but I was just doing it because it was natural. So one, when things are the right thing to do, they're natural, they're without agenda. But I read a book, so I think this is the best definition of it, and it's a great book, not on sales necessarily. It's just kind of how we can be more human in our workplaces, and it's an awesome book. It's just called "Bring Your Human to Work." Great title by Erica Keswin, and she says bringing your human to work is honoring relationships. Honoring relationships for me is the right thing to do. Like when you truly honor relationships, you know that they're just not superficial. They're more than that. You know, you can, some people say, touch people's lives. You can really affect them. You can be remembered. You can be like something that they, someone that they like tell other people about. Mm-hmm. And I think when you honor relationships, you put them, like you make them important. That means you do the things to really put in the work to support it, and you put in the work to really tell that person what they mean to you, not your business, but what they mean to you. It's natural. So I think whenever I've had situations like that happen or come up, I want to grab them because I want to do the things. They could be little things. They could be sending someone a card. They could be doing that. Some people would say it's a big thing. I think it's, kind of a little thing, but they don't have to be, gigantic things, but just making sure people know that like they matter to you is kind of what's really guided me, I guess you could say.
And I think that's so important because we're so glued, I guess you would say, or we're so addicted to social media, and we put something out there. It's like, oh, we've got to generate 100 likes or 200 likes, or, look at my post, look at this, look at that. And we don't understand a lot of times is that in life, it is about relationship. It's about developing those things and those relationships. I want you to take me now real quick. I want you to take me through your journey, because you've got an interesting journey of how you got from point A to point B. Did you, when you were going to college or early in your life, did you want to always go into sales, or was that kind of a path that you fell into?
Yeah, I never really fell into it, but I did want to take a different path, probably graduating school. But I mean, it goes way back. I put on LinkedIn, I learned sales at a very young age. I was that 8-year-old kid. I think it was in Cub Scouts or something like that, where you get a flyer, and the whole class competes against each other, and the top sellers, you get to pick from the catalog. If you sell a certain amount, you get to pick, and some of the big prizes at the time was a boom box. And I say for all the millennials, that was the cool. That was the
you held it up on your shoulder. It was like carrying a suitcase on your shoulder.
Yeah, you put these cool things called cassettes in there, and they played music. And then it actually had a CD player at the time, which was like the crispest way to listen to music. And I'm like, dang, so I can sell, and you'll give it. I can win this. So
can you believe nowadays, man? Can you believe? And I don't mean to interrupt you, but can you believe now that you can buy carry-on luggage that's literally the same size as the boom box that we had in the 80s?
No, I would have blown my mind as a kid. But yeah, this was a hefty 20-pound, 15-pound electronic device.
And here's the thing, you had to dance while you were doing it too.
Oh, yeah.
So you had to carry the 30-pound boom box on your shoulder. You had to make sure you had the D batteries, which were the big honking batteries in the back of that thing, because you had to have all the power for the bass thrust and everything like that. And you had to be able to dance walking down the street while you had 30 pounds on your shoulder.
I don't even know if I was so small as a kid. I just wanted it in my room. But yeah, I went door to door as a kid, like, just selling hams and cheeses and Christmas meats. And
you were the Mark Cuban of your day, man, because Cuban talks about selling trash bags door to door.
Yeah. And most kids did it at a church. They set up a table and or got their mom to sell for them or dad at their work. But I was like, no, screw that. I'm going to cover every house in this neighborhood. And I did it, and it was fun. And then I also had my first job, paying job, was a newspaper boy. So I mean, I think that's like the best job that a kid could ever have, because you learn customer service, you learn, organization, you learn, just work ethic and
well, you
just,
forgot one.
Just talking to people.
You forgot one. You learned product placement, because when you threw the paper,
that was
had
huge.
to land perfectly on the front porch.
I failed at that miserably. But then I learned, and
so that's why you're not quarterbacking the Redskins.
No, maybe. But I learned that everybody wants it differently. Like, just what you think is good, like putting it on like their front step and maybe like a little bit away, that person, they could give you complaints. You were actually paid on your complaints and your, I forget what they call them, but like your, people giving you compliments. And so, if one or two people gave you complaints, that you could get your pay docked. Mm-hmm. And like, I would be frustrated. Like, that person didn't like that. Like, why? So like, I would, I struggle with that. I didn't know, like, so, sometimes I would try to talk to them. Like, what do you need? How do you want me to do this and stuff like, so anyways, you learn a lot from that. And so, but yeah, throughout my life, like graduating college, I was a communications major, wanted to get into PR and corporate communications, never really found anything, right out of school. And I took my first job was back to door-to-door sales. I was like, what can I do? I had to work. And it was literally like a multi-level marketing company. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was learning sales, but I feel like I was learning the wrong way to sell. So I was learning kind of a manipulation type of a sale. You were going into doors and you were like trying to, fear people. They called it the Fuji factors: fear of loss, urgency, greed, indifference. And manipulation works. It does. Yeah. Marketers use it, and we all are being manipulated daily without even realizing it. But, so I was trying to go to your door, like selling you, pizzas or oil changes, or it was a coupon card. I was just trying to sell you this coupon card for $20, but it paid for itself. So I would go, hey, Brian, I'm running around here with Pizza Hut. Hey, do you eat pizza? Yeah. How about every pizza, the next time you order something for free. You get something for free the next time you order it. Sounds like a great deal. All right, check this out. And I was just trying to get these coupon cards into your hands. And then I would go through and point out all the coupons and then close the door and try to sell you in like a minute. And you learn a lot about talking to people that way, and yourself. It was full commission. Just get dropped off in a neighborhood, but then the whole deal was like you were trying to work your way up. And then I got really skeeved out because you were trying to manipulate people to come into the company and kind of fear of loss them into joining, and it was really bizarre. But yeah, I've all been in sales my whole life, and kind of in my career just in different roles. And I think I've just loved being able to, it's creative. There's an art and the science behind it. And I just love like the infinite possibilities that can happen with conversations. And that's always interested me. Like, what are people thinking when people say certain things? How should I respond? And it's not perfect. I still don't. It can never be perfected. That's another thing. It's a calling. It's a craft. It's something that even the best of the best, I don't care who you are, they screw up all the time, actually, and they try to learn from it.
Something, I love what you said there, and there's a couple things that I'm gonna take the conversation in a different direction off of what you said. The first thing is, I remember when I took a route sales territory for the first time. I took a mature sales territory. I was replacing a guy that had been there a couple years, who replaced a guy that had been there for 15 years. He replaced a guy that built the territory, was kind of a legend in the company. So I had all this lineage that I was following from a sales perspective, and I was 25 years old. And one of the older veteran reps came up to me one day and put his arm around me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he called me sexy. He said, "Sexy." He said, "It's going to take you 3 years to figure out what you're doing." And he was spot on, because the thing that I had to learn, Alex, was consistency. I had to learn that customers wanted to be seen at this time and this. So I knew every Tuesday morning I was going to be at the Shake Shop in Gallipolis, Ohio on Jackson Pike talking to Jeff, the owner. Every Tuesday morning, unless I was on vacation or something happened, I was there. I mean, like you could know where to find me. And a couple of times the company did this because this was before everybody really had cell phones. And if they wanted to get a hold of you, like, oh yeah, here's Brian's route list. Oh, he's going to be at the Shake Shop. They call, hey, is Brian there? Yeah, look, we'll talk to him in a second. It was consistency. That's the thing. Here's where I want to spin our conversation forward. I love something you said that you learned early in your sales career that now has become a part of our vernacular called FOMO, fear of missing out. When you think about selling today and people having FOMO, what can salespeople do to calm that FOMO and really bring that human touch back in to selling to where that FOMO is reduced or eradicated altogether?
Man, yeah. I don't know. Like, what are they like? What fears are they missing out on? I guess I would ask that salesperson. I mean, I think I think in sales, anyone that's selling for a living or has to convince somebody for something, for their idea to be heard or anything, all of that, I think it all comes down to asking, how am I really like trying to help this other person and help make their lives better and the world better afterwards? And I'm not really, I won't have any fear of missing out on anything if that's my ultimate goal or aim in the end. Like, it doesn't matter what job I take, it doesn't matter, where I think my career could have gone, or, like what like the fears kind of subside when you just genuinely have that, guide moving you forward. And, it sounds like we're I just want to like help people. Well, okay, that can be a guide to your career. Some people, don't, or some people, they want to help, people heal and they're working at a hospital. But if you just genuinely want to help people, like, sales is a good place to start. And I don't think you can really miss out on anything, because that's so all encompassing that, you can really take that anywhere.
And, here's the thing. You have a lot of entrepreneurs out there that go, I'm not a salesperson. But yet you open the door to a business and you expect people to come through your doors. So you are selling something, whether you own a tire shop, whether you own a massage parlor, whether you own a coffee shop, whether you own a restaurant or a pizza shop. You are a salesperson, and you have a belief so strongly in what you do and how you do it that you want to share it with the population in large and in general. When you think back, and I love you talking about your early days in your sales career, when you go through your career and you go through your life, tell me about the biggest obstacle that you overcame.
This is a tough one. I mean, I can go at a lot of things. I mean, I've changed. I've like had to go from going from selling door to door to selling in an office, like in a call center, to like working with in a completely new industry and in newspapers with, I mean, that was a pretty big obstacle where I had zero, like it was one of those sales jobs. I went into a completely new industry, newspapers, didn't know anything, selling to human resources people, didn't know anything about HR, didn't know anything about them, and was given a territory and like, here you go. Here, like, this is a bit professional. I'll talk professional first and maybe we can get into personal, but professional. Here's a territory. Just here's how I present for an hour. Here's a list of people, go make calls. No other coaching than that. And here's your quota and go get after it. Really? Like, I don't have any leads. Like, you're not giving me any total new business. Yeah, go after it. So like, I said, look, I'm not going to fail at this. I'm going to try to like ask as many questions as I can, listen to people that are doing it, try to go out with people on sales calls, not be afraid of picking. That was tough. Like just being afraid, anybody that starts their, I don't care who you are, like the first time you start selling something new and you pick up that phone, it's freaking scary. Like, because you don't know what the hell the person's going to say on your script, based off of your script. You don't know enough about your product to know how to combat objections, So I don't care. I know people are afraid that have been doing it 15 years when they start selling something new, because you just don't know all the possibilities, and you don't ever want to act like you don't know. So that was a big obstacle. And I had people saying, yeah, I don't know if this guy's going to succeed. And I ended up, being one of the top sellers. I stayed there for 5 or 6 years, had a bunch of promotions and a big, somebody people look to on the team. And I started from zero.
So how did that drive you? So how did that, I didn't mean to jump in there, but how did that drive you? Because most people, one of two things happens. When somebody says, I don't know if they're going to make it, the person that is battling that fear, there's a part of them that goes, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not going to make it. And then there's the other person that's the other way around that goes, forget them. I'm going to make it just to show them that I can. And I'm going to make it just to prove to them that I'm going to make it. And then there's a lot of people right in the middle that, depending on the day, they either believe that they can conquer the world, or they believe that tomorrow they're going to turn in their resignation and go do something else. When you speak to people like that, Alex, and that's why I wanted to jump in there, because I love where you were going with that, and I want to pull more conversation out that way. When you speak to people that are going through that are right there in the middle, what do you talk to them about? How do you help them and get them through that?
Yeah, I think it's the questions you ask yourself and the stories you tell yourself are kind of what is going to kind of define it. And then people call it interrogative self-talk. And you ask yourself, can I do this? And I like asking, can I do this? And then you go back in your mind, you challenge yourself and go, okay, like I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. Like I can do this. It's not like, oh, I'm going to just do this. Some people think like you should just say like, I'm going to conquer no matter what. And then if you don't, then it's a huge letdown. Instead of like I just said, like, can I do this? I'm not going to listen to like anybody else's like outside. I just, can I do this? Can I pick up the phone and call people? Yeah, I've done that. Can I learn something, a new sales process? Like, yeah, I've done that. Like, can I, talk to people over the phone? Can I meet people? And these are, whenever I answer those can I statements, they're always like, things that I end up challenging myself and realizing myself that I can do that. And I gain confidence that way. So I think asking yourself those questions and, going back in your experiences and finding out if those things support what you're trying to do. But then always just saying like, I feel like I'm always the optimist, but I'm not. I think, there's a difference between just being a consummate optimist and being an optimist that can also realize the situation that they're in. So like people call it the Stockdale paradox. So the Good to Great is a book that's in. It's all about like this guy, Jim Stockdale. He was in, Hanoi Hilton with John McCain. And, this is basically he was a prisoner of war. And he said the people that didn't make it out were the optimists. They thought, oh, I'm going to make it out by Christmas. I'm going to make it out. Christmas came and went. They didn't get out. But he said the people that did make it out were people that, were optimists, but they never lost sight of the reality that they faced. So it was like, they never lost faith that they'll prevail in the end. They knew their situation. They said, okay, like we're in prison, but they're like, I'm also never, I will get out of this. Like I know that there's light at the end of this tunnel, but they realized the situation that they were in. They just didn't say, I'm going to get out of this. So that's what I think, just realizing the situation you're in, but never losing faith that you're going to prevail.
If I said to you, Alex, if you could change one thing about this, what would it be?
Change one thing about
anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if like I also like to think it's not my responsibility to assume anything needs to be changed necessarily. So I want to, you know, first approach things like that. But if I could, change one thing just about life in general is that we all, kind of see each other. Take a step back, take a few more seconds, and just say there's another story behind Brian. There's another story behind Alex that I can't see just by looking at him on the outside or the color of his skin or, even maybe, by just, what he's wearing or what he maybe says a few seconds. Maybe I just heard him speak a few seconds. You know, everyone has a backstory and it's really, really interesting. Like crazy sometimes. You'd be like, no way. And sometimes they might not tell you right off the bat, but if you're curious enough to take a step and get to know them, like it just builds on itself. People will start telling you stories. That's why I love the stories of selling human. That's why I love this intentional encourager, because when when you put that intent, you show intention, and you're not just, it's not superficial. I think you can give surface level encouragement like great job, Brian, or you can just actually go deeper and actually be specific and try to like understand someone's story and then give them that much more powerful encouragement, and you get a lot of connections, and I think just the world would be a better place if we all do that. So that's why I just love kind of your whole concept behind this.
Well, I appreciate that, Alex. And I'll tell you this is that stories, people love stories. They love to connect with something from someone else's life that they can go, oh yeah, I've been through that. I've done that. I remember when I lost my dad 7.5 years ago, when someone else, I had a couple friends, really good friends, that ended up losing their dads pretty suddenly like I did. And I was like, man, here, been there, done that. And we were able to help each other by just calling back. And I'll tell that story from time to time about the day my dad passed away. And I can still think about, what I was doing and where I was at and things like that. You have, and I want to go here real quick in the little bit of time that we have, your story. And I love the way that you just seamlessly transitioned about stories, because this is what this is about, is telling inspiring stories from inspirational people. Your story is real neat. And we talked about this before we got started recording. You come from a biracial family. And for a lot of people, that might be a stigma, but for you, you're very proud of that fact. Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about how you found out about that and how you dug a little bit deeper into your lineage.
Yeah. It was probably not until high school. Like my dad, it's on my dad's side of the family. Both of his parents were mixed. One grew up in DC in the 40s, and my grandfather was mixed visibly, so you can see, light-skinned black man. My grandmother was a light-skinned black woman, but she was so light-skinned that back then, she needed to pass to be white. Meaning like people couldn't really tell, but she was so light-skinned that people, really mistook her for white. So, growing up in DC, I mean. To get the mortgage, to get the loan on their house, my grandmother had to go get the loan. To go to restaurants, my grandmother had to take my dad to restaurants. To go to swimming pools, my grandmother had to take my mom or my father. And this despite the fact that my grandfather was this really accomplished black doctor. He was one of the first black doctors, pediatricians in all of Washington, D.C. He was a real famous guy. Knew Charles Drew, the guy that invented plasma. Charles Drew was also a very, very light-skinned black man. And so, I didn't really find it out until kind of like high school. And it was funny, like my dad kind of told me about his background. I mean, I knew about it, but we didn't really talk about it too much until, kind of like I grew up a little bit, and it was funny because I would tell people in high school, they would find out, and my black friends would, oh, you got a drop of black blood and you black, man, you're a brother, man. And I said, well, look, I'm a white guy. Like, you look at me, I'm a white guy, but I'm proud of that history because it's part of me. And I don't visibly identify as black. My dad did because he had an afro, and he like, he's visibly a black man. He might have white skin, but darker skin. But that's the thing, you just don't know about people. Like, he was growing up, and his roommate in high school and a boarding school wouldn't let him. The father didn't want my dad to board with his white son because he was black. That's what he grew up at. So like that, I was always taught at a young age, like, we are so much more than like our skin color. Everyone's equal. He believed in the inherent worth and dignity of all human beings. He believed we're all connected on this earth. Didn't matter our country. He was not about just countries. He thought, the entire world was part of one country, the human race, or the earth country, whatever you want to call it. And so my dad, I love talking about him. We could have a whole hour-long conversation, but I'll just end off with, he really framed how I see the world, because he knew so much about. He really knew that people inside were so much more important than what was on the outside. And
so powerful.
Martin Luther King said it best.
Yeah,
I care more about the content of your character than the color of your skin.
So powerful, and I appreciate you sharing that, because again, it shapes who we are. Not only the experiences that we have in life, but the ancestral part of our life. That's why, like, 23andMe and ancestry.com, they have really built a booming business, because people are so interested, where did I come from? Why do I have, this characteristic? Or, and I'll say this, my dad's grandfather was Indian. And so my grandmother had Indian ancestry in her. My dad, when he would grow a beard, or when he wouldn't shave for 3 or 4 days, he would get a real red tint to his beard. I have zero red in my beard. I'm trying to fight off the gray. My son, oh man, when he grows his beard, it's the red just pops.
It's awesome.
In his beard. It's amazing how generationally that we find those things, those hidden characteristics in us that just manifest in certain generations. Like, I had no idea about that. I love that. I'm so glad you shared that story and things like that. And man, what a heritage to come from, Alex.
Can I say one last story?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one last story.
Please.
So how they were mixed, people are like, how did races mix? Early on, there was a lot of segregation in the country, right? And it was like generational. We have on grandmother's side, she grew up in the South, and there was a Confederate general that had a child out of wedlock with one of his slaves, and there was a whole family kind of down the line, and that's kind of how my grandmother came to be. And now we would look, and my dad would always talk about this white Confederate general, and he was a history teacher, and right now, we would look at that and be like, that is, it's a terrible kind of thing that had to happen. But he also gave money, and this isn't to condone anything that he did, but he also knew that he had to support. So he gave money secretly to his that side of his family. And it was just really, people are complicated. Let's just say that. Like he said, it's complicated. Our lives are complicated.
That is so fascinating to me when, because as you go back and trace your family heritage and your family history, you now can tie it back on one side of your family all the way back to the Civil War and specifically know this is where I came from. This is the lineage that I came from. And I think we found a book in my wife's grandparents' house. We lived next door to my wife's grandparents. Her grandmother passed away a few years ago, but her grandfather's still alive at 98. And her grandmother kept a little notebook of the family side of so we know when my wife's great-grandfather was born, her great-grandmother, who she didn't know on her dad's side or granddad's side. And so we're starting to trace some of those things back. And on her great-grandfather's side, we go back to he was born in 1889 because he died when he was 96 back in 85.
Yeah.
And so we've got that little notebook, and I told my wife, I said, put that up.
Yeah.
Put that somewhere. We've got my grandmother's family Bible. Put that up. Protect it, because those are pieces of history for everybody's family that you can't replace. They're invaluable. Yeah. I want to finish here, and Alex, man, this has been such a cool intentional encouragement podcast. I want you to leave the audience today as we close out with your biggest piece of intentional encouragement.
That I've done with other
doesn't matter. What's your biggest piece of intentional encouragement? If I would say, Alex, encourage me, man, I need some encouragement, what would you tell me?
I think I would, I would tell you that I believe in you. I think that, first off, you really get to know people. We talked a whole lot about it, and encouragement isn't, I don't believe in superficial. If you called your podcast the Encourager, I don't know if it would have the same weight, I
should have done that. I should have taken a picture with the Encourager.
Yeah. It was a big smile on your face. People would be like, who is this jerk? But
they say that anyway. It's okay.
But no, when I say that, I want to really get to know people, and I don't say I just believe in you just to say I believe in you. I want to know you and know what you're trying to do and what you want and what you're telling yourself you want to do, and you're saying I will do this. I'm going to start a podcast. Hey Brian, I believe you will, man. I'm here to support you. And when other people say that, and they say it in different ways. I think people say I believe in you in different ways. They just, hey, you want to jump on a call and I'll listen to you. I'm not going to judge you. Just, hey, I might challenge you. I think you can challenge people. That's another thing. I think people mistake encouragement. You can't challenge. You can challenge people, but then, don't come from a place of genuine, being really genuine. Man, I just want you to do what you want, man. I want you to be where you want to be, and I'm here to help in any way. And tell me, I have an idea. I have a way to do something. It might not be the way, and here's just what I think. But you're gonna do it, and no matter what. And I believe you can get there, Brian. So,
that's awesome. What a great way to end the Intentional Encourager podcast today with Alex Smith. You can find him at his Stories of Selling Human podcast. Alex, tell everybody where else they can find you and your content.
Yeah, man. LinkedIn's the best. Just, Alex C. Smith on LinkedIn. My hashtag is Selling Human. And like he said, I have a website, Stories of Selling Human. You can Google it. I'm on, the podcast itself is on wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you like to listen. And I'd love to hear from you. I think these audiences, would really mesh and like to hear what we both have to say. So thank you for having me on.
No question. And literally, this dude is a Washington Redskins fan. It's the funniest thing, man. The first time we talked and he tells me he's a Redskins fan, I'm like, hold up. HTTR. Yeah, HTTR. Alex Smith, you're the best, man. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. And until next time, remember, everyone
everywhere, at any time, and any place, and be an intentional